So saying, he dismissed them. They with speed their course through thickest constellations held, spreading their bane. The blasted stars looked wan, and planets struck, real eclipse then suffered. The other way Satan went down the causey to hell gate. On either side, disparted chaos, overbuilt, exclaimed, and with rebounding surge the bars assailed that scorned his indignation. Through the gate, wide open and unguarded, Satan passed, and all about found desolate. For those appointed to sit there had left their charge, flown to the upper world. The rest were all far to the inland retired, about the walls of Pandemonium, city and proud seat of Lucifer, so by illusion called, of that bright star to Satan paragonned. There kept their watch the legions, while the grand in council sat, solicitous what chance might intercept their emperor sent. So he departing gave command, and they observed, as when the Tartar from his Russian foe by Astrakhan over the snowy plains retires, or Bactrian's Sophie from the horns of Turkish Crescent leaves all waste beyond the realm of Aladul in his retreat to Tauris or Casbin. So these, the late heaven-banished host, left desert utmost hell many a dark league, reduced in careful watch round their metropolis, and now expecting each hour their great adventurer from the search of foreign worlds. He through the midst, unmarked, in show plebeian angel militant of lowest order passed, and from the door of that Plutonian hall, invisible, ascended his high throne, which, under state of richest texture spread, at the upper end was placed in regal lustre. Down a while he sat, and round about him saw, unseen. At last, as from a cloud, his fulgent head and shape star-bright appeared, or brighter, clad with what permissive glory since his fall was left him, or false glitter. All amazed at that so sudden blaze, the Stygian throng bent their aspect, and whom they wished beheld, their mighty chief returned. Loud was the acclaim. Forth rushed in haste the great consulting peers, raised from their dark divan, and with like joy congratulant approached him, who with hand silence, and with these words attention won. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, for in possession such not only of right I call ye, and declare ye now, return successful beyond hope, to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit abominable, accursed, the house of woe and dungeon of our tyrant. Now possess, as lords, a spacious world to our native heaven little inferior, by my adventure hard with peril great, achieved. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged the unreal, vast, unbounded deep of horrible confusion, over which, by sin and death, a broad way now is paved, to expedite your glorious march. But I toiled out my uncouth passage, forced to ride the untractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild, that jealous of their secrets fiercely opposed my journey strange, with clamorous uproar, protesting fate supreme. Thence how I found the new created world, which fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful of absolute perfection. Therein man, placed in a paradise by our exile made happy. Him by fraud I have seduced from his creator, and the more to increase your wonder, with an apple. He thereat offended, worth your laughter, hath given up both his beloved man and all his world to sin and death a prey, and so to us, without our hazard, labour, or alarm, to range in and to dwell, and over man to rule, as over all he should have ruled. True is me also he hath judged, or rather me not, but the brute serpent in whose shape man I deceived. That which to me belongs is enmity, which he will put between me and mankind. I am to bruise his heel, his seed, when is not set, shall bruise my head. O world, who would not purchase with a bruise, or much more grievous pain? Ye have the account of my performance. What remains, ye gods? But up, and enter now into full bliss. So having said, a while he stood, expecting their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when, contrary, he hears on all sides from innumerable tongues a dismal, universal hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more. His visage drawn he felt to sharp and spare, his arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant, but in vain. A greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned according to his doom. He would have spoke, but hiss for hiss returned with forked tongue to forked tongue, for now were all transformed alike to serpents all, as accessories to his bold riot. Dreadful was the din of hissing through the hall, thick swarming now with complicated monsters' head and tail, scorpion and asp, and amphisbaena dire, cerastes horned, hydrus and elops drear and dipsus. Not so thick swarmed once the soil bedropped with blood of Gorgon, or the isle of Phiosa, but still greatest he, the midst, now dragon grown, larger than whom the sun engendered in the Pythian veil or slime, huge Python, and his power no less he seemed above the rest still to retain. They all him followed, issuing forth to the open field, where all yet left of that revolted rout, heaven fallen, in station stood, or just array. Sublime with expectation, when to see and triumph, issuing forth their glorious chief. They saw, but other sight instead. A crowd of ugly serpents. Horror on them fell, and horrid sympathy for what they saw they felt themselves now changing. Down their arms, down fell both spear and shield, down they as fast, and the dire hiss renewed, and the dire form catched by contagion, like in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant turned to exploding hiss, triumph to shame cast on themselves from their own mouths. There stood a grove hard by, sprung up with this their change, his will who reigns above to aggravate their penance, laden with fair fruit, like that which grew in paradise, the bait of Eve, used by the tempter. On that prospect strange their earnest eyes they fixed, imagining for one forbidden tree a multitude now risen to work them further woe or shame. Yet, parched with scalding thirst and hunger fierce, though to delude them sent, could not abstain. But on they rolled in heaps, and, up the trees climbing, sat thicker than the snaky locks that curled Magera. Greedily they plucked the fruitage fair to sight, like that which grew near that bituminous lake where Sodom flamed. This more delusive, not the touch, but taste deceived. They, fondly thinking to allay their appetite with gust, instead of fruit, chewed bitter ashes, which the offended taste with spattering noise rejected. Oft they essayed, hunger and thirst constraining, drugged as oft with hatefulest disrelish writhed their jaws with soot and cinders filled. So oft they fell into the same illusion, not as man whom they triumphed once lapsed. Thus were they plagued and worn with famine, long and ceaseless hiss, till their lost shape permitted they resumed. Yearly enjoined, some say, to undergo this annual humbling certain numbered days, to dash their pride and joy for man seduced. However, some tradition they dispersed among the heathen, of their purchase got, and fabled how the serpent, whom they called Ophion, with Eurynome, the wide, encroaching Eve perhaps, had first the rule of high Olympus. Thence by Saturn driven, and Ops, ere yet Dictaean Jove was born. Meanwhile, in paradise, the hellish pair too soon arrived. Sin, there in power before, once actual, now in body and to dwell habitual habitant. Behind her, Death, close following pace for pace, not mounted yet on his pale horse, to whom Sin thus began. Second of Satan sprung, all-conquering Death, what thinkest thou of our empire now, though earned with travel difficult, not better far than still at hell's dark threshold to have sat watch, unnamed, undreaded, and thyself half-starved? Whom thus the sin-born monster answered soon. To me, who with eternal famine pine, alike is hell or paradise or heaven. Their best, where most with ravin I may meet, which here, though plenteous, all too little seems to stuff this maw, this vast unhide-bound corpse. To whom the incestuous mother thus replied, Thou therefore on these herbs and fruits and flowers feed first, on each beast next, and fish and fowl, no homely morsels, and whatever thing the scythe of time mows down, devour unspared, till I, in man residing through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions, all infect, and season him thy last and sweetest prey. This said, they both betook them several ways, both to destroy, or unimmortal make all kinds, and for destruction to mature sooner or later. Which the Almighty seeing, from his transcendent seat the saints among, to those bright orders uttered thus his voice. See with what heat these dogs of hell advance to waste and havoc yonder world, which I so fair and good created, and had still kept in that state had not the folly of man let in these wasteful furies, who impute folly to me. So doth the Prince of Hell and his adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter and possess a place so heavenly, and conniving seem to gratify my scornful enemies that laugh, as if transported with some fit of passion, I to them had quitted all at random, yielded up to their misrule. And know not that I called, and drew them thither, my hell-hounds, to lick up the draught and filth which man's polluting sin with taint hath shed on what was pure, till, crammed and gorged, nigh burst with sucked and glutted offal, at one sling of thy victorious arm, well-pleasing Son, both sin and death, and yawning grave at last, through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell for ever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. Then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure to sanctity, that shall receive no stain. Till then, the curse pronounced on both precedes. He ended, and the heavenly audience loud sung hallelujah, as the sound of seas through multitude that sung, Just are thy ways, righteous are thy decrees on all thy works, who can extenuate thee? Next to the Son, destined restorer of mankind, by whom new heaven and earth shall to the ages rise, or down from heaven descend. Such was their song, while the Creator, calling forth by name his mighty angels, gave them several charge, as sorted best with present things. The sun had first his precept so to move, so shine, as might affect the earth with cold and heat scarce tolerable, and from the north to call decrepit winter, from the south to bring solstitial summer's heat. To the blank moon her office they prescribed, to the other 5 their planetary motions and aspects, in sextile, square, and trine, and opposite, of noxious efficacy, and when to join in synod unbenign, and taught the fixed their influence malignant when to shower, which of them rising with the sun or falling should prove tempestuous. To the winds they set their corners, when with bluster to confound sea, air, and shore, the thunder when to roll with terror through the dark aerial hall. Some say he bid his angels turn askance the poles of earth, twice 10 degrees and more from the sun's axle. They with labour pushed oblique the centric globe. Some say the sun was bid turn reins from the equinoctial road like distant breadth to Taurus, with the 7 Atlantic sisters and the Spartan twins, up to the tropic crab, thence down amain by Leo and the Virgin and the scales as deep as Capricorn, to bring in change of seasons to each clime. Else had the spring perpetual smiled on earth with verdant flowers, equal in days and nights, except to those beyond the polar circles. To them day had unbenighted shone, while the low sun, to recompense his distance in their sight, had rounded still the horizon, and not known or east or west, which had forbid the snow from cold Aristotle land, and south as far beneath Magellan. At that tasted fruit, the sun, as from Thyestean banquet, turned, his course intended. Else how had the world, inhabited though sinless more than now, avoided pinching cold and scorching heat? These changes in the heavens, though slow, produced like change on sea and land. Sidereal blast, vapour and mist and exhalation hot, corrupt and pestilent, now from the north of Norumbega and the Samoyed shore, bursting their brazen dungeon armed with ice and snow and hail and stormy gust and flaw, Boreas and Sychaeus and Argestes loud, and Thracias rend the woods and seas upturn. With adverse blast upturns them from the south, Notus, and Afer black with thunderous clouds from Serra Leona. Thwart of these, as fierce, forth rush the Levant and the Ponent winds, Eurus and Zephyr, with their lateral noise Sirocco and Libecchio. Thus began outrage from lifeless things, but discord first, daughter of sin, among the irrational, death introduced through fierce antipathy. Beast now with beast gan war, and fowl with fowl, and fish with fish, to graze the herb all leaving, devoured each other. Nor stood much in awe of man, but fled him, or with countenance grim glared on him passing. These were from without the growing miseries, which Adam saw already in part, though hid in gloomiest shade, to sorrow abandoned, but worse felt within. And in a troubled sea of passion tossed, thus to disburden, sought with sad complaint. O miserable of happy! Is this the end of this new glorious world, and me so late the glory of that glory, who now become accursed of blessed? Hide me from the face of God, whom to behold was then my height of happiness. Yet well, if here would end the misery, I deserved it and would bear my own deservings. But this will not serve. All that I eat or drink or shall beget is propagated curse. O voice once heard delightfully, increase and multiply, now death to hear. For what can I increase or multiply but curses on my head? Who, of all ages to succeed, but feeling the evil on him brought by me, will curse my head? Ill fare our ancestor impure, for this we may thank Adam, but his thanks shall be the execration. So besides mine own that bide upon me, all from me shall with a fierce reflux on me redound, on me, as on their natural centre, light, heavy, though in their place. O fleeting joys of paradise, dear bought with lasting woes! Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me o'er here place in this delicious garden? As my will concurred not to my being, it were but right and equal to reduce me to my dust, desirous to resign and render back all I received. Unable to perform thy terms too hard by which I was to hold the good I sought not. To the loss of that sufficient penalty, why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems. Yet to say truth, too late. I thus contest. Then should have been refused those terms whatever, when they were proposed. Thou didst accept them. Wilt thou enjoy the good? Then cavil the conditions. And though God made thee without thy leave, what if thy son prove disobedient, and reproved, retort, Wherefore didst thou beget me? I sought it not. Wouldst thou admit for his contempt of thee that proud excuse? Yet him not thy election, but natural necessity begot. God made thee of choice his own, and of his own to serve him. Thy reward was of his grace, thy punishment then justly is at his will. Be it so, for I submit his doom is fair, that dust I am, and shall to dust return. O welcome hour whenever. Why delays his hand to execute what his decree fixed on this day? Why do I overlive? Why am I mocked with death, and lengthened out to deathless pain? How gladly would I meet mortality my sentence, and be earth insensible. How glad would lay me down as in my mother's lap, there I should rest and sleep secure. His dreadful voice no more would thunder in my ears, no fear of worse to me and to my offspring would torment me with cruel expectation. Yet one doubt pursues me still, lest all I cannot die, lest that pure breath of life, the spirit of man which God inspired, cannot together perish with this corporeal clod. Then, in the grave, or in some other dismal place, who knows, but I shall die a living death? O thought horrid if true, yet why? It was but breath of life that sinned. What dies but what had life and sin? The body properly had neither. All of me then shall die. Let this appease the doubt, since human reach no further knows. For though the Lord of all be infinite, is his wrath also? Be it, man is not so, but mortal doomed. How can he exercise wrath without end on man, whom death must end? Can he make deathless death? That were to make strange contradiction, which to God himself impossible is held, as argument of weakness, not of power. Will he draw out for anger's sake, finite to infinite? In punished man, to satisfy his rigour, satisfied never? That were to extend his sentence beyond dust and nature's law, by which all causes else, according still to the reception of their matter, act, not to the extent of their own sphere. But say that death be not one stroke, as I supposed, bereaving sense, but endless misery from this day onward, which I feel begun both in me and without me, and so last to perpetuity. Ay me, that fear comes thundering back with dreadful revolution on my defenceless head. Both death and I am found eternal and incorporate both. Nor I on my part single, in me all posterity stands cursed. Fair patrimony that I must leave ye sons. Oh, were I able to waste it all myself and leave ye none. So disinherited, how would you bless me, now your curse? Ah, why should all mankind, for one man's fault, thus guiltless be condemned? If guiltless. But from me what can proceed, but all corrupt, both mind and will depraved, not to do only, but to will the same with me? How can they then acquitted stand in sight of God? Him, after all disputes, forced, I absolve. All my evasions vain and reasonings, though through mazes, lead me still but to my own conviction, first and last on me only, as the source and spring of all corruption, all the blame lights due. So might the wrath, fond wish, couldst thou support that burden, heavier than the earth to bear, than all the world much heavier, though divided with that bad woman? Thus what thou desirest, and what thou fearest, alike destroys all hope of refuge, and concludes thee miserable beyond all past example and future, to Satan only like both crime and doom. O conscience, into what abyss of fears and horrors hast thou driven me, out of which I find no way, from deep to deeper plunged? Thus Adam to himself lamented loud through the still night. But now, as ere man fell, wholesome and cool and mild, but with black air accompanied, with damps and dreadful gloom, which to his evil conscience represented all things with double terror. On the ground outstretched he lay, on the cold ground, and oft cursed his creation. Death as oft accused of tardy execution, since denounced the day of his offence. "Why comes not death," said he, "with one thrice acceptable stroke to end me? Shall truth fail to keep her word, justice divine not hasten to be just? But death comes not at call. Justice divine mends not her slowest pace for prayers or cries. O woods, O fountains, hillocks, dales, and bowers, with other echo late I taught your shades to answer and resound far other song." Whom thus afflicted, when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed. But her with stern regard he thus repelled. "Out of my sight, thou serpent! That name best befits thee, with him leagued, thyself as false and hateful. Nothing wants but that thy shape like his, and colour serpentine, may show thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form pretended to hellish falsehood snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when least was safe, rejected my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself. Him overweening to overreach, but with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled, by him thou, I by thee to trust thee from my side, imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assaults, and understood not all was but a show, rather than solid virtue, all but a rib, crooked by nature, bent, as now appears more to the part sinister from me drawn. Well, if thrown out as supernumerary to my just number found, oh, why did God, Creator, wise, that peopled highest heaven with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill the world at once with men as angels without feminine? Or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not been befallen, and more that shall befall. Innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares, and straight conjunction with this sex. For either he never shall find out fit mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most shall seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gained by a far worse, or if she love, withheld by parents, or his happiest choice too late shall meet, already linked and wedlock bound to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause to human life and household peace confound." He added not, and from her turned. But Eve, not so repulsed, with tears that ceased not flowing and tresses all disordered, at his feet fell humble, and embracing them besought his peace, and thus proceeded in her plaint. "Forsake me not thus, Adam. Witness heaven what love sincere and reverence in my heart I bear thee, and unweeting have offended, unhappily deceived. Thy suppliant I beg and clasp thy knees, bereave me not, whereon I live, thy gentle looks, thy aid, thy counsel in this uttermost distress, my only strength and stay. Forlorn of thee, whither shall I betake me? Where subsist? While yet we live, scarce one short hour perhaps, between us two let there be peace, both joining, as joined in injuries, one enmity against a foe by doom express assigned us, that cruel serpent. On me exercise not thy hatred for this misery befallen, on me already lost, me than thyself more miserable. Both have sinned, but thou against God only, I against God and thee, and to the place of judgment will return, there with my cries importune heaven, that all the sentence from thy head removed may light on me, sole cause to thee of all this woe, me only, just object of his ire." She ended, weeping, and her lowly plight immovable, till peace, obtained from fault acknowledged and deplored, in Adam wrought commiseration. Soon his heart relented towards her, his life so late and sole delight, now at his feet submissive in distress. Creature so fair, his reconcilement seeking, his counsel, whom she had displeased, his aid, as one disarmed, his anger all he lost, and thus with peaceful words upraised her soon. Unwary, and too desirous as before, so now of what thou knowest not, who desirest the punishment all on thyself. Alas, bear thine own first, ill able to sustain his full wrath, whose thou feelest as yet least part, and my displeasure bearest so ill. If prayers could alter high decrees, I to that place would speed before thee, and be louder heard, that on my head all might be visited. Thy frailty and infirmer sex forgiven, to me committed, and by me exposed. But rise. Let us no more contend nor blame each other, blamed enough elsewhere, but strive in offices of love how we may lighten each other's burden in our share of woe. Since this day's death denounced, if aught I see, will prove no sudden, but a slow-paced evil, a long day's dying to augment our pain, and to our seed, O hapless seed, derived. To whom thus Eve, recovering heart, replied, Adam, by sad experiment I know how little weight my words with thee can found so erroneous. Thence by just event found so unfortunate. Nevertheless, restored by thee, vile as I am, to place of new acceptance, hopeful to regain thy love, the sole contentment of my heart, living or dying. From thee I will not hide what thoughts in my unquiet breast are risen, tending to some relief of our extremes or end, though sharp and sad, yet tolerable, as in our evils and of easier choice. If care of our descent perplex us most, which must be borne to certain woe, devoured by death at last, and miserable it is to be to others cause of misery, our own begotten, and of our loins to bring into this cursed world a woeful race that after wretched life must be at last food for so foul a monster. In thy power it lies, yet ere conception, to prevent the race unblessed, to being yet unbegot. Childless thou art, childless remain. So death shall be deceived, his glut, and with us too be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. But if thou judge it hard, and difficult, conversing, looking, loving, to abstain from love's due rites, nuptial embraces sweet, and with desire to languish without hope, before the present object languishing with like desire, which would be misery and torment less than none of what we dread, then both ourselves and seed at once to free from what we fear for both, let us make short, let us seek death, or he not found, supply with our own hands his office on ourselves. Why stand we long a-shivering under fears that show no end but death, and have the power of many ways to die, the shortest choosing, destruction with destruction to destroy? She ended here. All vehement despair broke off the rest. So much of death her thoughts had entertained, as dyed her cheeks with pale. But Adam, with such counsel nothing swayed, to better hopes his more attentive mind labouring had raised, and thus to Eve replied, Eve, thy contempt of life and pleasure seems to argue in thee something more sublime and excellent than what thy mind contemns. But self-destruction therefore sought refutes that excellence thought in thee, and implies not thy contempt, but anguish and regret for loss of life and pleasure overloved. Or if thou covet death as utmost end of misery, so thinking to evade the penalty pronounced, doubt not but God hath wiselier armed his vengeful ire than so to be forestalled. Much more I fear lest death so snatched will not exempt us from the pain we are by doomed to pay. Rather, such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live. Then let us seek some safer resolution, which methinks I have in view, calling to mind with heed part of our sentence, that thy seed shall bruise the serpent's head. Piteous amends, unless be meant, whom I conjecture, our grand foe, Satan, who in the serpent hath contrived against us this deceit. To crush his head would be revenge indeed, which will be lost by death brought on ourselves, or childless days resolved as thou proposest. So our foe shall 'scape his punishment ordained, and we instead shall double ours upon our heads. No more be mentioned then of violence against ourselves, and wilful barrenness that cuts us off from hope, and savours only rancour and pride, impatience and despite, reluctance against God and his just yoke laid on our necks. Remember with what mild and gracious temper he both heard and judged without wrath or reviling. We expected immediate dissolution, which we thought was meant by death that day, when, lo, to thee, pains only in childbearing were foretold, and bringing forth, soon recompensed with joy, fruit of thy womb. On me the curse aslope glanced on the ground, with labour I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse, my labour will sustain me, and lest cold or heat should injure us, his timely care hath unbesought provided, and his hands clothed us unworthy, pitying while he judged. How much more, if we pray him, will his ear be open, and his heart to pity incline, and teach us further by what means to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow, which now the sky with various face begins to show us in this mountain, while the winds blow moist and keen, shattering the graceful locks of these fair spreading trees, which bids us seek some better shroud, some better warmth to cherish our limbs benumbed, ere this diurnal star leave cold the night. How we his gathered beams reflected may with matter sear foment, or by collision of two bodies grind the air attrite to fire, as late the clouds justling or pushed with winds rude in their shock, tine the slant lightning, whose thwart flame driven down kindles the gummy bark of fir or pine, and sends a comfortable heat from far, which might supply the sun. Such fire to use, and what may else be remedy or cure to evils which our own misdeeds have wrought, he will instruct us, praying, and of grace beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, sustained by him with many comforts, till we end in dust, our final rest and native home. What better can we do than to the place repairing where he judged us, prostrate fall before him reverent, and there confess humbly our faults and pardon beg, with tears watering the ground, and with our sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned and humiliation meek. Undoubtedly he will relent and turn from his displeasure, in whose look serene, when angry most he seemed and most severe, what else but favour, grace, and mercy shone. So spake our father penitent, nor Eve felt less remorse. They forthwith to the place repairing where he judged them, prostrate fell before him reverent, and both confessed humbly their faults, and pardon begged, with tears watering the ground, and with their sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. Book 11. The argument. The Son of God presents to his Father the prayers of our first parents now repenting, and intercedes for them. God accepts them, but declares that they must no longer abide in paradise, sends Michael with a band of cherubim to dispossess them, but first to reveal to Adam future things. Michael's coming down. Adam shows to Eve certain ominous signs. He discerns Michael's approach, goes out to meet him. The angel denounces their departure. Eve's lamentation. Adam pleads, but submits. The angel leads him up to a high hill, sets before him in vision what shall happen till the flood. Book 11. Thus they in lowliest plight repentant stood, praying. For from the mercy seat above prevenient grace descending had removed the stony from their hearts, and made new flesh regenerate grow instead. That sighs now breathed unutterable, which the spirit of prayer inspired, and winged for heaven with speedier flight than loudest oratory. Yet their port not of mean suitors, nor important less seemed their petition, than when the ancient pair in fables old, less ancient yet than these Deucalion and chaste Pyrrha, to restore the race of mankind drowned, before the shrine of Themis stood devout. To heaven their prayers flew up, nor missed the way, by envious winds blown vagabond or frustrate. In they passed, dimensionless, through heavenly doors, then clad with incense where the golden altar fumed by their great intercessor, came in sight before the Father's throne. Them the glad Son presenting, thus to intercede, began. See, Father, what first fruits on earth are sprung from thy implanted grace in man. These sighs and prayers, which in this golden censer mixed with incense, I thy priest before thee bring, fruits of more pleasing savour, from thy seed sown with contrition in his heart, than those which his own hand manuring all the trees of paradise could have produced, ere fallen from innocence. Now therefore bend thine ear to supplication, hear his sighs, though mute. Unskilful with what words to pray, let me interpret for him, me his advocate and propitiation, all his works on me, good or not good, ingraft, my merit those shall perfect, and for these my death shall pay. Accept me, and in me from these receive the smell of peace toward mankind. Let him live before thee reconciled, at least his days numbered, though sad. Till death his doom, which I to mitigate thus plead, not to reverse, to better life shall yield him, where with me all my redeemed may dwell, in joy and bliss, made one with me as I with thee am one. To whom the Father, without cloud, serene, all thy request for man, accepted, Son, obtain. All thy request was my decree. But longer in that paradise to dwell, the law I gave to nature him forbids. Those pure immortal elements that know no gross, no unharmonious mixture foul, eject him, tainted now, and purge him off as a distemper gross to air as gross and mortal food, as may dispose him best for dissolution wrought by sin, that first distempered all things, and of incorrupt corrupted. I at first with two fair gifts created him endowed, with happiness and immortality. That fondly lost, this other served but to eternize woe, till I provided death. So death becomes his final remedy, and after life tried in sharp tribulation and refined by faith and faithful works, to second life waked in the renovation of the just, resigns him up with heaven and earth renewed. But let us call to synod all the blessed through heaven's wide bounds. From them I will not hide my judgments, how with mankind I proceed, as how with peccant angels late they saw, and in their state, though firm, stood more confirmed. He ended, and the sun gave signal high to the bright minister that watched. He blew his trumpet, heard in Oreb since perhaps when God descended, and perhaps once more to sound at general doom. The angelic blast filled all the regions. From their blissful bowers of amaranthine shade, fountain or spring, by the waters of life, where'er they sat in fellowships of joy, the sons of light hasted, resorting to the summons high, and took their seats. Till from his throne supreme the Almighty thus pronounced his sovereign will. O sons, like one of us, man is become to know both good and evil, since his taste of that defended fruit. But let him boast his knowledge of good lost and evil got. Happier had it sufficed him to have known good by itself, and evil not at all. He sorrows now, repents and prays contrite, my emotions in him. Longer than they move his heart I know, how variable and vain self-left. Lest therefore his now bolder hand reach also the tree of life, and eat, and live for ever, dream at least to live for ever, to remove him, I decree, and send him from the garden forth to till the ground whence he was taken, fitter soil. Michael, this my behest have thou in charge. Take to thee from among the cherubim thy choice of flaming warriors, lest the fiend, or in behalf of man, or to invade vacant possession, some new trouble raise. Haste thee, and from the paradise of God without remorse drive out the sinful pair, from hallowed ground the unholy, and denounce to them, and to their progeny from thence perpetual banishment. Yet, lest they faint, at the sad sentence rigorously urged, for I behold them softened and with tears bewailing their excess, all terror hide. If patiently thy bidding they obey, dismiss them not disconsolate. Reveal to Adam what shall come in future days, as I shall thee enlighten. Intermix my covenant in the woman's seed renewed, so send them forth, though sorrowing, yet in peace. And on the east side of the garden place, where entrance up from Eden easiest climbs, cherubic watch, and of a sword the flame wide waving. All approach far off to fright and guard all passage to the tree of life, lest paradise a receptacle prove to spirits foul and all my trees their prey, with whose stolen fruit man once more to delude. He ceased, and the archangelic power prepared for swift descent. With him the cohort bright of watchful cherubim. 4 faces each had, like a double Janus, all their shape spangled with eyes more numerous than those of Argus, and more wakeful than to drowse, charmed with Arcadian pipe, the pastoral reed of Hermes, or his opiate rod. Meanwhile, to resalute the world with sacred light, Leucothea waked, and with fresh dews embalmed the earth. When Adam and first matron Eve had ended now their orisons, and found strength added from above, new hope to spring out of despair, joy, but with fear yet linked, which thus to Eve his welcome words renewed. Eve, easily may faith admit that all the good which we enjoy from heaven descends, but that from us aught should ascend to heaven, so prevalent as to concern the mind of God high blessed, or to incline his will, hard to belief may seem. Yet this will prayer, or one short sigh of human breath upborne even to the seat of God. For since I sought by prayer the offended deity to appease, kneeled, and before him humbled all my heart, methought I saw him placable and mild, bending his ear. Persuasion in me grew that I was heard with favour, peace returned home to my breast, and to my memory his promise, that thy seed shall bruise our foe, which, then not minded in dismay, yet now assures me that the bitterness of death is past, and we shall live. Whence hail to thee, Eve, rightly called Mother of all mankind, Mother of all things living, since by thee man is to live, and all things live for man. To whom thus Eve with sad demeanour meek, ill worthy I such title should belong to me transgressor, who for thee ordained a help became thy snare. To me reproach rather belongs, distrust and all dispraise. But infinite in pardon was my judge, that I, who first brought death on all, am graced the source of life. Next favourable thou, who, highly thus to entitle me vouchsafest, far other name deserving. But the field to labour calls us, now with sweat imposed, though after sleepless night. For see, the morn, all unconcerned with our unrest, begins her rosy progress smiling. Let us forth. I never from thy side henceforth to stray, where'er our day's work lies, though now enjoined laborious, till day droop. While here we dwell, what can be toilsome in these pleasant walks? Here let us live, though in fallen state, content. So spake, so wished much humbled Eve, but fate subscribed not. Nature first gave signs, impressed on bird, beast, air, ere suddenly eclipsed after short blush of morn. Nigh in her sight the bird of Jove stooped from his airy tower, 2 birds of gayest plume before him drove. Down from a hill the beast that reigns in woods, first hunter then, pursued a gentle brace, goodliest of all the forest, hart and hind. Direct to the eastern gate was bent their flight. Adam observed, and with his eye the chase pursuing, not unmoved, to Eve thus spake. O Eve, some further change awaits us nigh, which heaven, by these mute signs in nature, shows forerunners of his purpose, or to warn us, haply to secure, of our discharge from penalty, because from death released some days. How long, and what till then our life, who knows? Or more than this, that we are dust, and thither must return and be no more. Why else this double object in our sight of flight pursued in the air and o'er the ground, one way the self-same hour? Why in the east darkness ere day's mid-course, and morning light more orient in yon western cloud that draws o'er the blue firmament a radiant white, and slow descends with something heavenly fraught? He erred not, for by this the heavenly bands down from a sky of jasper lighted now in paradise, and on a hill made halt, a glorious apparition. Had not doubt and carnal fear that day dimmed Adam's eye, not that more glorious when the angels met Jacob in Mahanaim, where he saw the field pavilioned with his guardians bright, nor that which on the flaming mount appeared in Dothan, covered with a campfire against the Syrian king who, to surprise one man assassin-like, had levied war unproclaimed. The princely hierarch, in their bright stand there left his powers to seize possession of the garden. He alone, to find where Adam sheltered, took his way, not unperceived of Adam, who, to Eve, while the great visitant approached, thus spake. Eve, now expect great tidings, which perhaps of us will soon determine or impose new laws to be observed, for I descry from yonder blazing cloud that veils the hill one of the heavenly host, and by his gate none of the meanest, some great potentate, or of the thrones above, such majesty invests him coming. Yet not terrible that I should fear, nor sociably mild as Raphael that I should much confide, but solemn and sublime, whom not to offend with reverence I must meet, and thou retire. He ended, and the archangel soon drew nigh, not in his shape celestial, but as man clad to meet man. Over his lucid arms a military vest of purple flowed, livelier than Meleboan, or the grain of Sarah worn by kings and heroes old in time of truce. Iris had dipped the woof. His starry helm unbuckled showed him prime in manhood, where youth ended. By his side, as in a glistering zodiac, hung the sword, Satan's dire dread, and in his hand the spear. Adam bowed low. He, kingly from his state, inclined not, but his coming thus declared. Adam, heaven's high behest no preface needs. Sufficient that thy prayers are heard, and death, then due by sentence when thou didst transgress, defeated of his seizure many days given thee of grace, wherein thou mayst repent, and one bad act with many deeds well done mayst cover. Well may then thy Lord, appeased, redeem thee quite from death's rapacious claim. But longer in this paradise to dwell permits not. To remove thee I am come, and send thee from the garden forth to till the ground, whence thou wast taken, fitter soil. He added not, for Adam at the news, heart struck with chilling gripe of sorrow stood, that all his senses bound. Eve, who unseen, yet all had heard, with audible lament discovered soon the place of her retire. O unsuspected stroke, worse than of death! Must I thus leave thee, paradise? Thus leave thee, native soil, these happy walks and shades, fit haunt of gods, where I had hoped to spend quiet, though sad, the respite of that day that must be mortal to us both, O flowers that never will in other climate grow, my early visitation, and my last at even, which I bred up with tender hand from the first opening bud, and gave ye names. Who now shall rear ye to the sun, or rank your tribes, and water from the ambrosial fount? Thee, lastly, nuptial bower, by me adorned with what to sight or smell was sweet, from thee how shall I part, and whither wander down into a lower world, to this obscure and wild? How shall we breathe in other air less pure, accustomed to immortal fruits? Whom thus the angel interrupted mild. Lament not, Eve, but patiently resign what justly thou hast lost, nor set thy heart thus overfond on that which is not thine. Thy going is not lonely. With thee goes thy husband, him to follow thou art bound. Where he abides, think there thy native soil. Adam, by this from the cold sudden damp recovering, and his scattered spirits returned, to Michael thus his humble words addressed. Celestial, whether among the thrones or named of them the highest, for such of shape may seem prince above princes, gently hast thou told thy message, which might else in telling wound, and in performing end us. What besides of sorrow and dejection and despair our frailty can sustain, thy tidings bring, departure from this happy place, our sweet recess, and only consolation left familiar to our eyes. All places else inhospitable appear and desolate, nor knowing us, nor known. And if by prayer incessant I could hope to change the will of him who all things can, I would not cease to weary him with my assiduous cries. But prayer against his absolute decree no more avails than breath against the wind, blown stifling back on him that breathes it forth. Therefore to his great bidding I submit. This most afflicts me, that departing hence, as from his face I shall be hid, deprived his blessed countenance. Here I could frequent with worship place by place where he vouchsafed presence divine, and to my sons relate, on this mount he appeared, under this tree stood visible, among these pines his voice I heard, here with him at this fountain talked. So many grateful altars I would rear of grassy turf, and pile up every stone of lustre from the brook, in memory or monument to ages, and thereon offer sweet-smelling gums and fruits and flowers. In yonder netherworld, where shall I seek his bright appearances, or footstep trace? For though I fled him angry, yet recalled to life prolonged and promised race, I now gladly behold, though but his utmost skirts of glory, and far off his steps adore. To whom thus Michael, with regard benign: Adam, thou knowest heaven his, and all the earth, not this rock only. His omnipresence fills land, sea, and air, and every kind that lives, fomented by his virtual power and warmed. All the earth he gave thee to possess and rule, no despicable gift. Surmise not then his presence to these narrow bounds confined, of paradise or Eden. This had been perhaps thy capital seat, from whence had spread all generations, and had hither come from all the ends of the earth to celebrate and reverence thee, their great progenitor. But this pre-eminence thou hast lost, brought down to dwell on even ground now with thy sons. Yet doubt not, but in valley and in plain God is as here, and will be found alike present. And of his presence many a sign still following thee, still compassing thee round with goodness and paternal love, his face express, and of his steps the track divine. Which, that thou mayest believe and be confirmed ere thou from hence depart, know, I am sent to show thee what shall come in future days to thee, and to thy offspring. Good with bad expect to hear. Supernal grace contending with sinfulness of men, thereby to learn true patience, and to temper joy with fear and pious sorrow. Equally inured by moderation either state to bear, prosperous or adverse, so shalt thou lead safest thy life, and best prepared endure thy mortal passage when it comes. Ascend this hill. Let Eve, for I have drenched her eyes, here sleep below, while thou to foresight wakest, as once thou slepst, while she to life was formed. To whom thus Adam gratefully replied, Ascend, I follow thee, safe guide, the path thou leadest me, and to the hand of heaven submit, however chastening. To the evil turn my obvious breast, arming to overcome by suffering and earn rest from labour won, if so I may attain. So both ascend in the visions of God. It was a hill, of paradise the highest, from whose top the hemisphere of earth in clearest ken, stretched out to amplest reach of prospect lay. Not higher that hill, nor wider looking round, whereon for different cause the tempter set our second Adam in the wilderness, to show him all earth's kingdoms and their glory. His eye might there command wherever stood city of old or modern fame, the seat of mightiest empire, from the destined walls of Cambalu, seat of Cathayan Khan, and Samarkand by Oxus, Temir's throne, to Paquin of Sinaean kings, and thence to Agra and Lahore of great Mughul, down to the golden Chersonese, or where the Persian in Ecbatan sat, or since in Hispahan, or where the Russian Tsar in Moscow, or the Sultan in Byzance, to Keston born, nor could his eye not ken the empire of Negus to his utmost port, Ekoko, and the less maritime kings, Mombasa and Quiloa and Melind, and Sofala, thought Ophir to the realm of Congo, and Angola farthest south, or thence from Niger flood to Atlas mount the kingdoms of Almansor, Fez, and Sus, Morocco and Algiers and Tremisen, on Europe thence, and where Rome was to sway the world. In spirit perhaps he also saw rich Mexico, the seat of Montezuma, and Cusco in Peru, the richer seat of Atabalpa, and yet unspoiled Guyana, whose great city Gerion's sons call El Dorado. But to nobler sights Michael from Adam's eyes the film removed, which that false fruit that promised clearer sight had bred. Then purged with euphrasy and rue the visual nerve, for he had much to see, and from the well of life 3 drops instilled. So deep the power of these ingredients pierced, even to the inmost seat of mental sight, that Adam, now enforced to close his eyes, sunk down, and all his spirits became entranced. But him the gentle angel by the hand soon raised, and his attention thus recalled. Adam, now ope thine eyes, and first behold the effects which thy original crime hath wrought in some to spring from thee, who never touched the accepted tree, nor with the snake conspired, nor sinned thy sin, yet from that sin derive corruption to bring forth more violent deeds. His eyes he opened, and beheld a field, part arable and tilth whereon were sheaves new reaped, the other part sheep-walks and folds. I' the midst an altar, as the landmark stood, rustic, of grassy sward. Thither anon a sweaty reaper from his tillage brought first fruits, the green ear and the yellow sheaf, unculled as came to hand. A shepherd next, more meek, came with the firstlings of his flock, choicest and best. Then sacrificing laid the innards and their fat, with incense strode, on the cleft wood, and all due rites performed. His offering soon propitious fire from heaven consumed with nimble glance and grateful steam, the others not, for his was not sincere. Whereat he inly raged, and, as they talked, smote him into the midriff with a stone that beat out life. He fell, and deadly pale groaned out his soul with gushing blood effused. Much at that sight was Adam in his heart dismayed, and thus in haste to the angel cried, O teacher, some great mischief hath befallen to that meek man who well had sacrificed. Is piety thus, and pure devotion, paid? To whom Michael thus, he also moved, replied, These 2 are brethren, Adam, and to come out of thy loins the unjust the just hath slain, for envy that his brother's offering found from heaven acceptance. But the bloody fact will be avenged, and the other's faith approved, lose no reward, though here thou see him die, rolling in dust and gore. To which our sire, Alas, both for the deed and for the cause, but have I now seen death? Is this the way I must return to native dust? O sight of terror foul and ugly to behold, horrid to think, how horrible to feel! To whom thus Michael, Death thou hast seen in his first shape on man, but many shapes of death, and many other ways that lead to his grim cave, all dismal. Yet to sense more terrible at the entrance than within. Some, as thou sawest, by violent stroke shall die, by fire, flood, famine, by intemperance more in meats and drinks, which on the earth shall bring diseases dire, of which a monstrous crew before thee shall appear, that thou mayest know what misery the inabstinence of Eve shall bring on men.